She poured the wine like it was any other Tuesday. The warm amber lights above the kitchen island cast a gentle glow over the butcher block countertop, the steam rising from the pasta pot, the clink of utensils in the sink. Everything about the scene was cozy, familiar, until she said it. "I've been thinking," Emily began, her voice light. "Maybe we should try an open marriage." I froze. The stem of my wine glass trembled slightly in my hand. For a moment, I honestly thought she was joking, one of her tone-deaf attempts at humor. But she didn't laugh. She didn't even glance up from the 2 glasses she was filling. She just continued as if she'd said she was out of almond milk. The silence between us stretched so tight it hurt. "You've been thinking what?" I finally managed. My voice cracked slightly, and I hated that. She turned, smile still faintly in place. "It's not that crazy, Daniel. A lot of couples are doing it. I read this article about how it actually strengthens long-term relationships. I mean, you've been so settled lately. Might be good for you too." That word, settled, landed like a slap. I set the glass down harder than I meant to, and the sound echoed. "So that's what I am to you now? A dull husband who needs spicing up?" Emily finally looked at me then, her expression unbothered. Worse, clinical. I didn't say dull. But if you think about it, you haven't exactly been exciting lately. I stared at her, trying to recognize the woman in front of me. We'd lived in this house just outside Austin for 6 years. We'd picked out the tile backsplash together, argued over countertop colors. I mowed the lawn every Saturday morning. She taught yoga on Zoom. We grilled burgers on Sundays. Was that really so unbearable? "You know what this sounds like," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "It sounds like you've already found someone, and now you're looking for a permission slip." Her gaze flicked away for half a second. That's all it took. I nodded slowly. "There it is." "Oh, come on," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Not everything's about cheating. Maybe I'm just tired of pretending that domestic bliss is enough. God, Daniel, sometimes you make this house feel like a retirement home." The words sliced clean, but it was what she said next that truly gutted me. "You're as boring as my sister." That hit like a punch to the throat. Because Emily's sister, Clara, was quiet, gentle, the kind of woman who blended into corners at family dinners. I'd always liked Clara's presence. Emily, on the other hand, mocked her behind her back. And now she was comparing me to her? I pushed back from the island stool. My chest felt tight. "You want excitement? Go find it. But don't expect me to applaud while you blow up our life and call it freedom." She opened her mouth, but I didn't wait. I walked out onto the back patio, the screen door snapping shut behind me. The wind cut sharper than expected, catching me off guard. I stood there in the dark, hands in my pockets, staring at the outline of our yard under the faint glow of porch lights. I could still hear her inside, humming faintly to herself as if nothing had happened, like she hadn't just tossed our vows into the blender and hit puree. My fists clenched. I wasn't going to let her set the terms of my humiliation. Not this time. I'd leave, but on my own terms. And she wouldn't see it coming. The next morning, I found myself sitting across from Marcus at a small cafe, just off South Lamar. One of those places with mismatched chairs and baristas who remember your name even if you wish they wouldn't. The smell of burnt espresso beans hung in the air, mingling with the early scent of cinnamon from the pastry case. Marcus stirred his coffee like it owed him money, glancing at me over the rim of his mug. So she actually said it? Out loud. I nodded, jaw tight, poured a glass of wine, and dropped it in like she was asking what I wanted on my pizza. He let out a slow whistle. And you didn't throw anything? Thought about it, I muttered, settled for walking out before I said something I couldn't unsay. Marcus had seen me through my worst college hangovers, a brutal startup collapse in my 30s, and the day my dad passed unexpectedly. But even he looked genuinely stunned this time. Emily's always had sharp corners, but man, that's something else. I stared into my coffee. I hadn't touched it. I keep replaying it, I admitted. Her face, the way she said I was as boring as Clara. Like it was just an observation. Like telling me the sky was blue. Marcus chuckled darkly. Clara, the one who cried during Bambi and still writes letters by hand. That's the one. Wow, he said, shaking his head. You must have really hit peak beige to land next to her on the personality chart. I gave him a flat look, but the edge of my lip twitched. Sorry, he added quickly. Humor defense. Habit. We were quiet for a while. Outside, people walked by with dogs, strollers, yoga mats slung over their shoulders. Austin in the fall. Still warm, still pretending things don't fall apart. Marcus took a sip and leaned forward. Look, I've been through divorce. Messy one. Different reasons, same feeling. And let me tell you, what Emily just did. That's not freedom. That's a dare. I blinked. A dare. Yeah. She wants to see how far she can push you before you either snap or crumble. And if you do either, she gets to say, see, I was right. He couldn't handle it. He sat back. But if you don't, if you keep your head and play it cool, you become unpredictable. And nothing shakes a control freak more than losing the script. I sat with that. Let it settle. Unpredictable, I repeated. Marcus smiled. Exactly. You don't need to fight her. She already handed you the match. All you gotta do now is watch the burn. I looked out the window. The street looked the same as it had 1,000 mornings before, but something in me had shifted. She thinks I've got nothing left to lose, I said quietly. Do you? Marcus asked. I thought about that. About the 6 years in that house. The dinners I cooked. The holidays I planned while she scrolled Instagram. The way I used to wait for her to walk through the door and smile at me like I was still worth coming home to. I don't know, I said, but I do know I'm done playing by her rules. Marcus leaned back with a satisfied nod. That's the guy I remember. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't need filling. And somewhere between the clink of a spoon and the hum of the city, a strange thing happened. For the first time in days, I felt something other than rage. I felt clarity. She wanted open? Fine. Let's open it. Just not in the direction she expected. It wasn't exactly planned. I told myself I was just going for a walk, that the park wasn't far, and I needed air. But the truth? I knew Clara jogged there most afternoons. Zilker Park sprawled wide under the afternoon sun, the breeze carrying that faint hum of early fall, somewhere between warm grass and distant barbecue smoke. Kids screamed from the playscape. Couples strolled hand in hand. People living lives that still felt intact. I spotted Clara near the lake's edge, sitting alone on a weathered bench with a thermos in her lap and earbuds in, watching the ducks skim across the water. She looked peaceful, alone, but not lonely. I almost turned around, but then she looked up and smiled. Daniel, she said, pulling out one earbud. Hey. I managed, shoving my hands into my pockets. She patted the empty side of the bench. Sit. Unless you're just ghosting your wife. I let out a low chuckle. Something like that. We sat quietly for a few beats. The water rippled gently in front of us. Somewhere behind us, a dog barked at a squirrel with righteous fury. How's Emily? Clara asked, voice light, but not casual. I glanced at her. You really want to know? She shrugged. You wouldn't be here if things were great. There it was. I exhaled slowly, staring out at the lake. She brought up the idea of opening the marriage last night. Over wine. Like she was suggesting a new brand of almond milk. Clara stiffened slightly. Wow. Yeah, that was my reaction, too. I rubbed the back of my neck. She said I was boring. Compare me to you. Clara's head turned sharply. To me, she said I was as boring as her sister. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was loaded. Clara looked back at the water, her voice quieter now. She always said I was forgettable, that I'd disappear in a room if the wallpaper had enough pattern. I looked at her. That's not how I see you. She didn't respond right away, just sipped from her thermos, then asked, So why are you really here, Daniel? The breeze lifted a strand of hair from her cheek. I hesitated, then said honestly, I needed to talk to someone who hasn't lied to me lately. Clara didn't flinch. Emily's been seeing someone, hasn't she? My heart jerked. What? She looked at me, eyes full of something sad. You didn't know? My breath caught in my chest. She dropped her gaze. I wasn't sure if I should say anything. She's been different. Cagey. And then last week, I saw her getting into someone's car outside a wine bar. It wasn't just drinks. I didn't move. Didn't blink. Inside, something collapsed. But on the surface, I stayed still. Who? I asked quietly. Clara shook her head. I don't know him, but I know the look. The words felt like stones dropped into water, spreading slowly, then sinking deep. I'm sorry, she said. You didn't deserve to hear it like this. I shook my head. No, I needed to hear it. The sun shifted, casting new shadows across the lake. You're handling this too well, she added softly. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. What's the point in breaking down? She made her choice. Now I make mine. Clara studied me, like she was seeing something different. Or maybe something I hadn't seen in myself yet. After a moment, she said gently. You're not boring, Daniel. You're just quiet. There's a difference. I turned toward her then. For the first time in days, someone was looking at me like I mattered. Not as a husband. Not as a disappointment. Just as me. I didn't say anything back. I didn't need to. Because for now, silence said enough. We stayed on that bench long after the sun started leaning west. The lake shimmered gold, rippling with the lazy wind, and a quiet settled between us. One that didn't feel empty. It just was. Clara hadn't said much since her confession, and I hadn't asked for more. I didn't want details. I didn't want to know where or when or how often. Knowing was enough. What was left now was everything else. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, watching a kid toss pebbles into the water a few yards away. They barely made a splash, but each one still rippled out. Concentric circles breaking the surface just enough to remind me that even little things could disturb the stillness. I hadn't realized Clara was still looking at me until I felt her hand on my forearm. Gentle, hesitant, but real. When I turned, her eyes were already full of something I wasn't prepared for. Pity? No. Worse than that, care. You deserved none of this, she said quietly. And just like that, something inside me cracked. I hadn't cried. Not when Emily said those words. Not even when the truth settled in my chest like a brick. But hearing it from Clara, those 5 words, cut deeper than anything Emily had managed. I looked away, blinking fast. I don't know what I did wrong. You didn't, she said. She's chasing something she doesn't even understand. Her hand hadn't moved. It rested lightly on my arm, warm even through the fabric of my sleeve. You always treated her with respect, Clara added, even when she didn't deserve it. I saw it. That surprised me. You noticed? She gave a small smile. Daniel, I noticed everything. You'd refill her tea when she wasn't looking. You'd pause shows she liked even when you weren't watching. You gave her space when she was in one of her moods, but you never left the room. Her voice was soft but steady. You didn't give up on her. A long breath escaped my chest. The bench creaked slightly as she shifted closer, just enough that our shoulders brushed. I used to envy her, Clara admitted, for having someone who showed up like that. I looked at her then. Really looked. Clara had always been the quiet one. The soft-spoken sister with calm eyes and a kind smile. The one who brought books instead of gossip to family dinners. I'd never thought of her as part of any equation that involved me. But now, she felt like the only honest voice left. You okay? She asked, softer this time. No, I said, but I'm better than I was an hour ago. She smiled again, small, like she didn't want to push it. Then, without warning, she leaned over and wrapped her arms around me. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't charged with anything. Just warm. I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone hugged me without expectation. Her arms held firm, and I didn't move at first. My body was stiff, surprised. But then, gradually, I let go, just a little. My arms folded around her, hesitant but grateful. We sat like that for a long moment. No words. No lake. Just 2 people in a stillness that finally didn't feel suffocating. When she pulled back, her hand stayed on my knee. I'm here, Daniel. Whatever happens next, you're not alone. I swallowed hard, nodded, and in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't love. It wasn't a plan, but it was something. And for the first time since Emily poured that wine, I felt it again. Choice. By the time I walked back into the house that evening, the sun had dipped just far enough behind the tree lean to cast long, amber shadows across the living room. The smell of garlic and something creamy drifted from the kitchen, and for a moment, I could almost pretend nothing had changed. Except everything had. Emily stood at the stove humming to herself, some upbeat pop tune she used to mock. She wore a soft green sweater and leggings, her hair loosely pinned up. She looked comfortable, relaxed, smug. Hey, babe, she said without turning around. I made that mushroom risotto you like. Figured we'd do something cozy tonight. I took my time hanging up my coat. The casual cheer in her voice, it wasn't real. It was armor. She turned finally, holding 2 plates. Want a glass of wine? Her tone was bright, rehearsed. I stepped into the kitchen and gave a polite smile. Sure, red's fine. No tension, no raised voice, just still water. Emily's eyes flicked toward mine, just briefly. I could see it, the flicker of uncertainty, like she was waiting for a delayed reaction. But I gave her none. I took the wine, sipped. Saturday, so, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I was thinking about last night. I raised an eyebrow mildly, keeping my expression unreadable. The whole open marriage thing, she continued, stirring her risotto absent-mindedly. I probably could have handled it better. I didn't mean it like some grand announcement. It was more exploratory, you know? I nodded slowly, savoring another sip of wine. Sure. Her fork paused midair. That's it, she asked. I shrugged. I've been thinking, too. She tilted her head, smile fading just slightly. Yeah, I said. Maybe you're right. Maybe some freedom wouldn't hurt. Emily blinked. She wasn't prepared for agreement. Not this easily. Not this calmly. Really, she asked. I gave her a slow smile. You wanted honesty, right? Exploration? I raised my glass. To new chapters. Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted her glass to meet mine. The clink between them was soft, but it echoed loud in the space between us. She laughed nervously. Wow, I honestly didn't think you'd be so cool about it. Why not? I said, folding my napkin across my lap. You said you needed something new. Maybe I do too. She studied me then, like I was speaking in a language she used to know but could no longer translate. There it was again, that flicker, that moment of hesitation. Who are you seeing? She asked lightly, almost like a joke. I smiled without answering. Because sometimes silence says more than any confession. Emily looked down at her plate. The clink of her fork suddenly sounded louder than it should have. I let her sit in it. Let her wonder. Let her feel, for once, the shift. Because this wasn't Daniel the accommodating. This was Daniel the unknown. And the unknown always unsettles the ones who thought they held the map. She reached for her wine again, drinking deeper this time. Okay, she said finally, too quickly. Well, I'm glad we're being adults about this. I nodded. Me too. And I watched her smile. Watched it falter, just a hair. Because for the first time since she lit the match, she had no idea how far the fire would spread. The next few days passed like nothing had ever happened. At least, that's how Emily acted. She slipped back into routine with the same shallow grace she used to navigate every social event, smiling just wide enough, asking the right questions, pretending everything was good as long as nobody raised their voice. But I could feel it. The silence wasn't the same anymore. It had shape now, a pulse. And she noticed it, too. Which is probably why she didn't bat an eye when I mentioned Clara might be stopping by. She's bringing over some of your mom's old photo albums, I said casually over breakfast. Emily looked up from her phone just long enough to nod. Cool. I forgot we even had those. I could see her trying not to flinch. Clara arrived that afternoon, wrapped in a soft maroon cardigan, her hair in a loose braid, carrying a brown paper bag full of dusty albums and folded notes. Her knock was gentle, respectful. I opened the door with a smile I didn't have to fake. Hey, I said. She stepped inside slowly, glancing around. Wow, I haven't been here in forever. It hasn't changed much, I replied, stepping aside so she could pass. Still pretending to be cozy. She smiled, then caught sight of Emily's yoga mat rolled in the corner and lowered her gaze. We settled at the dining table, albums open between us. Old photos of childhood birthdays and family holidays spilled across the wood grain, snapshots of a life I barely recognized anymore. Clara pointed at one. Remember this? She asked. Your 30th? Emily got you that vinyl player you never used. I chuckled. It was a thoughtful dust collector. Her hand brushed mine as she flipped a page. Neither of us moved. Emily stayed upstairs, claiming she had a Zoom class, but I could feel her footsteps above us every now and then, circling, pausing, listening. Clara didn't mention her once. We moved through the photos slowly, laughing at terrible haircuts and outdated clothes. She had this way of leaning in when she laughed, like the moment pulled her forward. I hadn't realized how much I missed that sound, or how good it felt to be near someone who didn't look through me. At one point, I got up to grab wine. When I came back, she was standing by the kitchen window, watching the wind stir the trees. This house always had good light, she said softly. I handed her a glass. It's just brighter today. She glanced at me, surprised by the honesty. But she didn't look away. We sat in the living room next, flipping through another album on the coffee table. Clara had kicked off her shoes, tucked her feet beneath her, and leaned into the cushions like she'd always belonged there. And maybe, in some strange way, she did. Our conversation slowed. The energy softened. And somewhere between old vacation photos and a half-finished glass of wine, I stopped thinking about what I was doing. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about peace, about gravity, about being seen by someone who didn't need to be convinced. Our hands touched again, this time lingering. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. But we didn't speak. Because some things don't need words. They just need time. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man pretending to be okay. I felt like a man beginning to breathe again. The rain started around dawn, soft at first, just a hush against the windows. The kind of rain that made everything feel still, like the world had pressed pause. I didn't expect Clara to come by that day. She texted, brought the other album. You up for coffee? It should have felt casual, innocent, but nothing felt innocent anymore. By 10, the house smelled like dark roast and cinnamon toast. Clara stood barefoot near the sink, drying a mug with one of Emily's embroidered kitchen towels. She hummed quietly, a melody I couldn't place, but it made the silence warmer somehow. Emily was at a weekend yoga retreat in San Antonio. Her idea, of course, said she needed space to reconnect. I hadn't asked what or who with. Clara poured the coffee and joined me at the table, her cardigan sleeves pushed up just past her elbows, hair pulled back into a lazy bun that somehow made her look softer. Familiar. So, she said, setting the mug down. Tell me a secret. I raised an eyebrow. That's a dangerous request. She smirked. You first. I took a sip of coffee. Let the bitterness sit for a beat. All right, I said. When I was 12, I used to sneak into the garage at night and take my dad's car manual into bed with me. I memorized engine diagrams like other kids memorized baseball stats. Clara laughed. That's weirdly charming. Your turn. She leaned back, staring out the rain-streaked window. I wanted to be a poet, she said quietly. Like, full-time. With rejection slips and empty bookshelves and everything. Why didn't you? My mother called it impractical, she said, looking down at her cup. Said writing was a nice hobby, but not a real life. I studied her for a moment. What do you think now? She looked up, and her eyes held something raw. Now I think I believed her for too long. The clock ticked softly from the kitchen wall. Outside, the rain thickened, blurring the trees into watercolor. We talked for hours, about childhoods that weren't quite broken but cracked in quiet places. About the things we thought we'd grow into but never did. And the things we never expected to feel, until now. When she spoke, Clara looked at me like she wasn't afraid of what she might find there. And that was what undid me. At one point, she reached for her mug and our hands brushed again. This time, neither of us pretended it didn't mean something. I used to think love meant staying. I said suddenly, my voice low. Clara turned toward me. Even when it hurt, I continued. Even when you weren't sure who you were anymore. I thought that was loyalty, that it made me good. She didn't speak, just listened, fully. But lately, I added, I don't think about Emily the same anymore. She swallowed. How do you think about her now? I looked out at the rain, like she was a storm that passed through. Loud, sudden, and gone before I really understood what hit me. Clara's fingers found mine under the table. She didn't squeeze. She just held. And for once, I didn't feel like I had to earn it. We sat there like that, hands intertwined, as the rain whispered against the roof and the world outside faded to gray. There was nothing romantic said. No kiss. No declarations. But something changed. Something opened. And neither of us reached to close it. If Emily knew anything, it was how to play a room. The barbecue was her idea, of course. A backyard get-together to remind everyone we're still so modern and strong. Her words, not mine. She wore a white sundress with sunglasses perched like a crown on her head. That kind of effortless, curated chaos that made people say she was charming. Inviting. A woman in control. The grill smoked steadily. Burgers sizzled. Kids ran in crooked loops. And someone had set up a playlist that mixed country ballads with pop hits like it was a deliberate experiment in emotional confusion. I stood near the cooler, nursing a beer and watching the whole thing unfold like a guest at my own funeral. Clara was there, too. She stayed mostly by the garden wall, talking to Emily's cousin about bird feeders and compost, completely at ease, completely out of the spotlight. And yet, my eyes kept drifting back to her. Not because of anything she said or did, but because of what she didn't do. She didn't perform. She didn't pretend. Emily, however, was in full form. She stood at the center of a semicircle, friends, co-workers, distant family. All eyes on her as she sipped white wine and let the words flow. You know, she said, laughing a little too loudly. Some people just aren't built for monogamy. And that's okay. Daniel and we've evolved. I didn't flinch. Someone raised an eyebrow, curious. You mean, like open marriage? Emily beamed. Exactly. We're trying this whole modern love thing. Less jealousy, more adventure. Keeps things exciting. There were chuckles. A few impressed looks. One or two confused ones. She basked in it. And then, she turned toward me. Right, honey, she called. Tell them how freeing it is. He's basically dating my sister now. Kidding. She winked at the group, sipping again. My hand didn't tighten on the bottle. My jaw didn't clench. I just smiled, slow and unreadable. Open and honest, I said calmly. That's what you wanted, right? Her smirk faltered just a beat. She moved on, launching into some anecdote about a yoga client who'd mistaken her for a therapist. Everyone laughed again, but something shifted. Some of the smiles turned unsure. Clara caught my eye across the yard. She didn't smile. She just nodded, small and steady. And that was enough. Later, after the crowd thinned and paper plates littered the patio, Emily found me by the fence. Her face was flushed, maybe from the wine, maybe from the effort. You were quiet, she said, watching me carefully. I shrugged. You had it covered. She tilted her head. You're distant lately. I met her gaze. So are you. She blinked. That wasn't the response she expected. Are you mad about the joke? She asked, almost teasing. It was just to lighten the mood. I stepped closer, lowered my voice. You keep calling this freedom, Emily, but all you've done is build a stage and beg for applause. She stared at me. For once, nothing clever came out of her mouth. I walked away, not angry, not triumphant, just done, because letting her talk was part of the plan now. Let her keep spinning her story. I already knew how mine would end. The envelope came just after sunset. I heard the soft clink of the mailbox, the rustle of paper, and the creak of the box closing. No fanfare, no signature required. Just a manila envelope tucked between flyers and credit card offers. I let it sit on the kitchen counter for a while, unopened. The stove was already warm, and Clara stood by it, barefoot in a faded sweatshirt that hung just a little too wide at the collar. She stirred the sauce like she'd been cooking in that kitchen for years, even though it was only her third time using the stove. Smells good, I said quietly, coming up behind her. She didn't jump, didn't look startled. She just leaned slightly toward me, like we were tuned to the same frequency. I added a little rosemary, she said. Emily always overused basil. That made me laugh. A real one. The first in a while. Clara smiled. We cooked in sync, passing knives and spoons like choreography. Garlic sizzled. The sauce thickened. Music played low from my phone. Some mellow jazz track Clara hummed along with. There was peace in the ordinary. And that's what made it feel extraordinary. When we finally sat down at the small table by the window, the envelope was still there, waiting. Clara didn't mention it. She didn't need to. We ate slowly, with no rush. Her bare foot brushed mine once under the table and didn't pull away. Her eyes lingered just a second longer when she laughed at something I said. There were pauses between words, but they didn't feel empty. They felt full. After dinner, we cleaned up together. No division of labor. Just motion. Water. Suds. Dishes clinking gently into the rack. Like we'd done it 100 times before. And then I reached for the envelope. Clara didn't flinch. She dried her hands, then turned and leaned against the counter as I opened it. The papers were neatly clipped. Everything filled out. Only my signature was missing. I read through them once. Then twice. And then, with a deep breath, I signed. Just like that, it was done. I set the pen down. Looked at Clara. Her eyes were steady. You okay? I nodded. Yeah. Actually, yeah. She crossed the room, slowly, and wrapped her arms around me. Not like someone taking advantage of a moment, but like someone anchoring it. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The pavement still shimmered, reflecting the porch lights of neighboring houses. Everything was quiet. And then, without a word, I turned on the music again. Something old. Something slow. I offered her my hand. She smiled and took it. We danced right there in the kitchen, socked feet sliding gently across the tile, arms locked around each other like we'd done it 1,000 times. No big declarations. No whispered promises. Just the rhythm of the moment. The warmth. The gravity. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was rebuilding. I felt like I was home. The housewarming party was held at one of Emily's college friends, a big place in East Austin with high ceilings and too many throw pillows. The kind of gathering where people wear button-downs with just the right amount of ironic wrinkles, and everyone pretends the kombucha cocktails are delicious. Clara was by my side. We didn't plan it like that. We hadn't even discussed what it meant. But when I asked if she wanted to come with me, she said yes without hesitation. And when we walked in together, laughing at some inside joke about burned garlic, neither of us looked back. The room buzzed with chatter and curated playlists. Someone offered us drinks, and Clara disappeared into a conversation with a woman about art therapy. I drifted toward the kitchen, comfortable in the background, until I heard it, Emily's laugh. Loud. Performing. I turned. She stood in the middle of a small group, wine glass raised, eyes sparkling. A younger guy stood beside her, hanging on every word. I didn't know him. I didn't need to. Oh, you guys don't get it, she was saying. Daniel and I are, like, pioneers of the evolved relationship. It's all about trust, right? She winked. He's probably flirting with the plants right now. The group laughed. Polite. Nervous. That's when Clara rejoined me, holding 2 glasses of wine. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Just watching the show. We stood close, not touching, but close enough. And then it happened. Emily turned, saw us, and for a moment, froze. Just long enough to matter. I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. The realization. The image she tried to control slipping through her fingers. She marched toward us. Wow, she said too loudly. You two are awfully cozy tonight. Clara stayed still, calm. I met Emily's gaze. We're comfortable. She let out a laugh that didn't quite land. Isn't this perfect? My husband and my sister. How modern of us. I didn't flinch. You wanted modern. I'm just catching up. Her face flickered. You think this makes you clever? She hissed, stepping closer. Dragging her into our mess? I didn't drag anyone, I said. You handed me the leash the night you said you were bored. I just chose where to walk. She turned to Clara. Seriously? You're okay being a backup plan? Clara set her wine down slowly on the counter. Emily, she said softly. He never treated me like a backup. You did. Silence. It spread, rippling through the room as conversations quieted. Heads turned. People leaned in. And then, Clara opened her purse. She pulled out a manila folder and set it on the coffee table with a gentle thud. Emily's eyes narrowed. What is that? I looked her dead in the eye. Insurance. She hesitated. Then, as curiosity overcame pride, she opened it. Photos. Screenshots. Printed texts. Timestamps. Evidence. Every lie she ever asked me to swallow laid out in glossy paper and ink. Gasps. A few awkward coughs. Someone muttered, "Oh my God," near the hallway. Emily stood frozen, staring down at her own trail of betrayal. You said I should try your sister, I said quietly. So I did. Her mouth opened, closed. Nothing came out. And in that silence, Clara reached for my hand. No hesitation. We turned and left, the front doors swinging gently behind us. We didn't speak in the car. Didn't need to. Because in one moment, everything she tried to twist had unraveled. And for the first time in months, I wasn't angry. I was free. 1 year later, the world looks different. Our mornings begin with mountain air and the smell of pine. We live in a small town tucked into the Colorado foothills. 1 grocery store, 1 coffee shop, and a bookstore that smells like old paper and vanilla. It's quiet here. Not the kind of quiet that makes you feel alone, but the kind that reminds you you've finally come home. The house is modest. White siding, green shutters, a porch swing Clara picked out from a secondhand store. I built her a small garden out back. Her tomatoes are already stubborn and wild, like her. Every morning, I drink my coffee barefoot on the porch, watching the mist roll off the trees like it has somewhere better to be. Clara's inside, humming to herself as she paints something abstract in the studio we turned the guest room into. She doesn't talk about Emily anymore. Neither do I. Not out of pain. Just because it doesn't matter now. We see her sometimes, from a distance. Online. A tagged photo, a mutual friends update. Her social circle fractured after that night. People didn't stay neutral. Some distanced quietly. Others unfollowed louder. Whatever image she tried to hold on to didn't survive the crash. She lives alone now. Still in Austin, last I heard. Teaching fewer classes. Smiling less in photos. Still trying to convince the world she's thriving. But there's something in her eyes. You can't fake regret. Not for long. Sometimes I wonder what she thinks when she sees our names together. On the deed, on mail, on that article Clara published last month about starting over after betrayal. But I don't linger there. Because the truth is, this wasn't revenge. It was realignment. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I just chose better. Chose me. And somewhere along the way, I found someone who didn't want to change me. Just sit beside me in the truth. The best things in life don't crash through the door with fireworks. They knock gently. They wait. They feel like Clara's hand on my chest when she falls asleep. Like dinner by candlelight with no occasion. Like laughing over spilled soup because neither of us remembers the recipe. The best things come when you stop chasing the wrong ones. And sometimes, just sometimes, the sister who was always overlooked turns out to be the one who sees you most clearly. Funny, isn't it? How the very joke that was meant to tear me down ended up setting me free.